بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode of Islamic Politics in America. This is a show that, if you've been following along, you've noticed the structure and the vision behind this show. It's about merging Islam and politics under the vision and mission of Hazrat Mufti Muneer Ahmed Akhoon Sahab, whose vision and mission is that Islam has politics and politics has Islam. There's no difference between the two. Now, if you've been following along our shows, you've noticed that we have two segments. One segment led by me, which I go into a specific topic for the day regarding either community organizing or just governance in general. And then in our second segment, we have an Islamic scholar who is able to shed some more light on that topic with regards to the Islamic lens. Now, without further ado, I want to go into the topic at hand for today. We're going to be changing things a little bit and doing just one segment, inculcating and imbibing all those aspects into one full segment. Now, today's topic at hand goes back to a story I want to share with you all. A story based on true events. Most, if not all, of the details of this story are 100% true. The story starts with a young teenage boy. Let's call him Salim. Salim is going to high school. He's Muslim, as you might expect from his name. He's a junior in high school, and he goes to a high school in America, where there's not only just Muslims at the high school, but there's many non-Muslims as well. Now, Salim, some people know he's Muslim, some people don't know he's no Muslim. Those who have conversations with him are able to know his faith and religion. It so happens that in an English class of Salim's, he's talking to some of his friends on this table just like this one, where there's many people on one table, classmates, friends, other people. And they start talking to each other about Googling each other. For some reason the topic came up that we should, let's start Googling each other and see what happens when we put our names into Google. And so they start going around the table, and they start Googling every single person. Eventually, they get to this boy, Salim, and they put his name into Google, and they search for his name up on Google. And you'll be surprised by what happens afterwards, because once they do put his name, all these things start coming up. Some of them, maybe essays and poems that Salim had written for the local school website or paper. But then as they scrolled down, they started seeing these videos on YouTube of Salim. And Salim didn't look like the Salim that comes to high school, who's in this English class just like everyone else. Salim looks like a little different. He's wearing this thing on top of his head. Don't know what it is, some kind of hat. He's in this video, he's talking into a microphone. He's not really talking. I don't know what he's doing. He's reciting something. He's singing something. It sounds pretty good, but it's rather unusual. And so all these non-Muslim friends at the table, as they start looking at this video in which Salim is reciting Quran, as it turned out, they start laughing. They start laughing at him for just how unusual the whole situation was, this thing that he was wearing on his head, the way he was singing but not really singing. He wasn't really looking at the camera, he was looking somewhere else. And so they started laughing at him. And Salim felt very dejected and mortally devastated in that moment. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know, how do I respond to this situation? How do I stand up for myself? Do I stand up for myself? Do I talk about this? Do I explain this to them? How do I go about explaining this to them? And in that myriad of emotions, Salim decides to just stay quiet. He doesn't look at them, he doesn't engage with them, and he goes on with his work. Now you'd think that would be the end of the story. But a day later, Salim comes back to that same table in that same English class with those same friends who sat at that table the next day. And out of nowhere, one of the kids at the table looked at Salim and said, "Yo, Salim, I just want to make something clear. Like that video we were looking of you yesterday. I didn't mean to laugh at you or anything. I actually went back home and I watched the whole video myself, and I thought it was pretty cool, man. I think it wasn't that bad. Like it was really interesting. Like I listened to it, and it sounded really good." And it wasn't just that one kid, but the other kids started chiming in as well and said the same thing. And they, in a way, apologized to Salim, saying that they were very sorry if he felt offended by how they were laughing in that moment, watching that video. Think about how many of us as Muslims go about our lives, our day-to-day, everyday lives, living in this country or just living in the West, in a non-Muslim area. And whether we are apologetically Muslim or whether we are unapologetically Muslim, whether we wear our faith on our sleeve or whether we simply go about the motions, somewhat trying to acclimatize and assimilate into the culture. I want you to think of that. I want you to think of how you carry yourself as a Muslim living in this country, especially if you're someone who goes to school, goes to elementary, middle, high school, college in this country. What is it that you go about doing? How is it that you carry yourself in your day-to-day life? How are you as a Muslim? How are your mu'amalat? How are your relationships with other people? Do you strive to, in any way, let people know that you're a Muslim? Or take it further from there and ask them or spark conversations regarding Islam, thereby implicitly giving those non-Muslim friends da'wah and preaching to them indirectly about Islam? Do you mention in conversations with people when you're working on a group project, "Oh shoot, sorry, it's time for dhuhr. I need to go out and just step out for 5 minutes and pray. I'll be right back"? Do those things happen in your day-to-day life? How many of your non-Muslim friends truly know that you're Muslim? And if they do, what do they think a Muslim is? Those are the questions I want you to lay out in front of you and start answering, especially as a young Muslim living in this country. And I want to turn to a second story. This one involves some of my early days living in this country. I remember living in New York City, and going to high school, and having problems, especially when it came to Friday. And it wasn't exactly that easy to, say, leave school and go to a masjid and pray Jummah there. And I'll never forget, there was this rather old woman at the time. She was in her 70s at the time. She probably has to be in her 80s at this point. But her name was Susan Gambari. And I hope and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that one day she becomes Muslim if she hasn't already. But she was nice and kind enough to let me and my siblings and other friends pray dhuhr every day in her office, because there was no other space, other prayer / meditation space in the whole school, or any other quiet area for Muslims like us to be able to go and just pray. She let us use her office space to pray dhuhr. And there's something important in this story, because I want to talk to you about organizing, community organizing, and how you get a community in focus, in action, by doing things. How do you create an MSA? How do you create a Muslim Student Association? A group where people of like-minded faith and identities can come and mingle with each other and, pick off ideas off of each other. And I remember in those early days when we would go and pray Dhuhr in her office, that eventually led towards then us getting and talking to more and more Muslims in the school and saying, oh, you know what, there's this place where, we could go and pray if you ever need to. And that eventually turned into praying Jummah in eventually the auditorium, because her office wasn't that big enough to take on all these 10, 15, 20 people to pray Jummah. So we started praying Jummah in the auditorium. And that was a regular weekly Friday prayer service that we were doing every single week. That's community in action. That's organizing in action. That's advocacy in action. That's lobbying in action. That's something that I think a lot of Muslims, living in this country, we don't think about too much. Why is it that we simply are fine with being on the side, with maybe our parents picking us up every single week on Friday, every single Friday, we're leaving school early, our parents pick us up, and maybe we go to a local masjid and pray Jummah there. Why not make it even more convenient for yourself and get more and more Muslims from your school to pray Jummah in school, in a separate place? That way you're not missing too much of your studies either, I think that's something that we as Muslims need to think about and do more of. We shouldn't just simply be apologetically Muslim. We should be unapologetically Muslim. We should be standing up for this identity that we believe in, for this religion that we believe in, for this truth and justice, the truth of ourselves, so that we're not being two-faced or being someone else in one place and being a different person in the other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Ma'idah, He says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ بِالْقِسْطِ شُهَدَاءَ لِلَّهِ. O you who believe, stand firmly. كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ. Qawwam is someone that has roots in the ground. They're deeply firm in their place. They have such strong roots that it's very hard to uproot them. They stand for something very strongly. It's very hard to get them to waver in that. كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ بِالْقِسْطِ شُهَدَاءَ لِلَّهِ. Stand firmly for justice, for truth, as witnesses before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If that's something we need to do, then I think in one way, especially for us young Muslims living in this country, one of those ways of standing firm against injustice, against dhulm, against the forces that may be, is organizing and getting people to join a force and say, hey, you know what, we should do this. We should form a group where we have weekly meetings as an MSA, or we're doing weekly Friday prayers in one simple place. And maybe there might be pushback. Maybe your school might be very new to this and they don't know exactly how to handle it. They might tell you that you can't do it. But that's just an obstacle for you to get over. And that, if anything, is one way in which you're standing against the injustices being done against you, because you as a Muslim in this country have the freedom of religion to be able to freely express and practice your own religion in this country. Nobody can take that right away from you, that freedom away from you. And so I think it's high time, if you haven't done already, to start thinking about, how do I start organizing people? How do I get the people that I talk to one-on-one in different situations, different classes, different periods, different places? How do I get them all to come as one, make them all into one group and say, oh, you know what, let's all band together and let's start praying in congregation in one place. Let's start with Jummah. Let's start praying Jummah in one place, as opposed to going home and praying at home, or going to a masjid somewhere else and missing half of the day or missing classes. Let's start becoming one group and praying together. And I can't tell you how many benefits can come out of that, subhanAllah, through that. That's just one way in which you get a group going, and that group can go and start becoming bigger and bigger and more beneficial for all the many Muslims that come later to that high school or college. It's you laying down the foundation, sowing the seeds, putting down the roots for an MSA to eventually build and thrive, inshallah. And if anything, I think it'll give you the sadaqah jariyah. You'll get the perpetual reward afterwards for having laid down, established those foundations. Because later on, there'll be, you don't know, how many more Muslims coming to that high school of yours, coming to that college of yours, and recognizing the MSA, making themselves part of it, joining it, leading it, and making it even better than maybe you could have ever imagined. And you, having left that seed, left that mark, are able to get that ajr, that thawab, and those hasanat, and those rewards forever and ever and ever. And it only helps you in the hereafter. So what is a legacy that you want to leave behind? How are you going to stand up for truth and justice? How are you going to organize, build coalitions with other people, get groups together, and start using that to your advantage? So I hope and pray and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give me and you and all of us this newfound strength and hope in laying down our roots and building bridges and coalitions with other people. I ask and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes these things easier for you and me and all of us, so that we're able to build coalitions and groups and build MSAs and eventually build huge communities that help with the civic and political power of Muslims in this country. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for joining me on this show. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope you have a blessed, blessed day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.